Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Welcome to McNally Jackson Seaport. Thank you for coming on this beautiful, wet, hot summer afternoon, evening to see the luminary Gary Indiana read. Gary Indiana is a novelist and critic who has chronicled the despair and hysteria of America in the late 20th century. And from Horse Crazy, 1989, which is a tale of feverish love set against the backdrop of downtown New York amidst the AIDS epidemic, to Do Everything in the Dark, which is my favorite, y'all should read it. A desolate frieze of New York's aging bohemians, Indiana's novels mix horror and bathos, grim social commentary, with passages of tenderest, frailest desire. With 1997's Resentment, a comedy, Indiana began his true crime trilogy, following up with 3 Month Fever, the Andrew Cunanan story, in 1999, and Depraved Indifference in 2002. Together, the three novels show the most vicious crimes of our nation's history to be only American pathologies personified. In 2015, Indiana published his acclaimed anti-memoir, I Can Give You Anything But Love, and later the novel Gone Tomorrow, called, quote, one of the most brilliant critics writing in America today, unquote, by the London Review of Books, the punk poet and pillar of lower Manhattan society by Jamaica Kincaid, and one of the most important chroniclers of the American psyche by The Guardian. Gary Indiana remains both inimitable and impossible to pin down. And we did get him here this afternoon. The memoir is really wonderful. Gary, you're a hero of mine.
Thank you. So sweet.
Thank you all for being here. It's really good.
I'm getting rid of my iPhone. Somebody came to visit me the other day and they showed me this Samsung shell phone that just, opens this way, and then when you close it, it turns off. I want that. I'd like to point out that everyone alive today is aging. It's not just me. Actually, I think I'll tell you a story. Somebody told me the other day, a person I know who had a lot of problems. He was living in New York with his partner, but then they kind of split up, but they were living together because they owned this duplex together. They decided to start a new life, so they moved to Bucks County in Pennsylvania. And the younger of the two died. Like, he had a very fast-moving cancer, and he died within 6 months of diagnosis. So now this guy is alone in this house, and he's a little bit mad and not really taking very good care of himself, and he has a lot of problems, drug problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a kind of really nice guy. But he's there in Bucks County, and nobody's around him. He doesn't, there's nobody to make friends with or anything like that. So, I asked about it yesterday, who it was that somebody who was doing some sort of yard work for him or something like that said, I know this guy that you probably would really like. You don't have any friends out here, you'd probably like this guy. So the guy, he introduces the guy to John, I'll say his name. And, he sees him a few times, not like, not romantically or anything, but just to have a friend, somebody to talk to. And at a certain point, the guy says to him, I have a court case coming up. Would you be a character witness for me? So John says, yeah, sure, why not, of course. So he goes to the courthouse on the day of this trial. He's thinking the guy, maybe had a fender bender or some kind of accident, that, liability for something. And he's sitting where, people sit in the courtroom in the back. And it turns out the guy's a child molester. So John sort of slipped out of the courthouse. People are funny. Okay, I'm going to read from this. If you think I'm going on too long, then just cough. A man in my neighborhood used to wish me dead whenever he saw me in the street, as he walked two enormous, snarling, unfixed male dogs. I'll be happy when you're dead, he would say, or anyone can see you're shrinking with age, or you'll be dead soon. And he would say this with a big, goofy grin on his deranged face, not only on the sidewalk, but also in the corner deli, the local bookstore. If you saw me there, never loudly enough to be overheard, but distinctly, implacably, with obvious sadistic pleasure, in the matter-of-fact way that someone might remark on the weather. And this man, who was tall and bald and unpleasant-looking, with eyes twinkling with insanity behind his thick glasses, had written a novel once, a neighbor told me, and believed his brilliance had not been sufficiently recognized. And not only wished me dead, but wished many others in the neighborhood dead in the course of his dog walks, perhaps everyone he saw. These maledictions went on for 2 years, and eventually had their intimidating effect. After a time, whenever I left my building, I feared having to confront this person's madness. Life is difficult enough without this kind of thing. In Regla, finally, I paid a Santeria priest 20 pesos to make this person stop bothering me. When I got back to New York, a woman who worked in the bookstore told me the man with the dogs had died suddenly a week before from a cerebral hemorrhage. I don't really believe the Santeria priest had anything to do with it, but for a moment it was nice to think so. I wonder what happened to the dog, she said. Maybe he took them to hell with him, I said. But look here, I said. I can't help thinking there is a lesson in all this. He wished me dead. He told other people he wanted them to die. And then his brain exploded. You know, I got this idea from a book of Ernest Hemingway's stories. He wrote these little kind of really tiny short stories between the longer stories. So I'll read another one. In the Philippines, almost every week, someone is killed at a karaoke bar for singing My Way by someone who doesn't like his singing. My Way is, of course, a hubristic and self-congratulating song, as many Frank Sinatra standards are. But My Way is a particularly abrasive song for people who have to listen to someone else singing it. A person who thinks he did it his way is often mistaken. But even if he really did, it's sometimes prudent not to sing about it. A lot of this book is set in Cuba because I spent a lot of time in Cuba for about, 13 years. When Abdul left the other day, I sat on the terrace smoking and looking at the trees for a long time. On the grounds of the Institute of something or other across the street, the leafage of several ceiba trees meshes with the plumage of a laurel whose roots have pushed through the sidewalk on Los Presidentes. This foliage obscures a cluster of royal palms, clusias, and soursops that form a massive shape-shifting topiary when it shures in the trade winds. A ginger tabby lives behind the Institute's perimeter wall in a shady, sunken garden. A condor slipped across the sky. I picked chicken bits from a pasta salad Nada had cooked for lunch and walked over to Los Presidentes and fed them to the ginger cat, who had settled under a bench on the paseo for the afternoon. At night, when swarms of mohawk punks and skinny Rastafarians roam the paseo, I feed the cats along Calle 21 between here and the Hotel Nacional. While the ginger cat finished her meal, I thought about Ferd being dead. Excuse me. That spring 11 years ago, we drank on the Prado and the colonnades around the Capitolio with shady characters Freud collected wherever we went. I couldn't follow the conversations, but I suspected the altitude at his end was absurdly high, since his sudden compadres were creeps intent on getting drunk at his expense and hoping to rob him if the chance presented itself. Freud believed they were thirsting for an earnest discussion of socialism. For a brilliant person, he could be amazingly clueless about other human beings. We ended each night at the cafeteria on 23, surrounded by boys offering pinga grosso for a little present, normally $20 and a t-shirt, or a pair of sunglasses. A comical, rage-filled transvestite calling herself Madonna, who looked like Luke Velez in Mexican Spitfire, pined from Miami, a BMW, and marriage to an elderly billionaire. She appeared on the stroke of midnight, artfully disheveled, as if she had been ravaged in a taxi minutes earlier. For the price of a cerveza, Madonna would introduce an emphatically willing, heroically endowed, nice, good boy, certifying along with his pinga magnificence that he came from a decent family and wouldn't steal anything if we let him stay the night. She was always truthful. She'd had them all before herself. The straight-up pingueras were few then among boys who are now Abdul's age, and except for Abdul, have disappeared, or like Madonna died. Sorry. Yesterday's pingas came attached to quite honest young men, in fact, who were more interested in sex with a foreigner than the little present they received afterwards. They were students or held real jobs and did, by and large, come from decent families. They more or less believed in the revolution, despite the siren call of South Beach. I don't know why this is making me very emotional suddenly. And I wasn't emotional when I was writing it. Sex was fugitive, fraught with the thrill of the forbidden, though nothing was more commonplace. Now, when even Fidel denounces homophobia, and the whole country senses the inevitable demise of socialism, sex has become a cold, private enterprise for the sons and younger brothers of vanished sweethearts. They prefer Nike trainers to affection. Their cell phones have become more involving than sex of any kind. Still, unless they are firmly attached to a rich man from elsewhere, they are totally available at the same depressingly low prices. The ease of things astonished Freud. Inevitably, he began to moralize about it from the world-improving altitude he habitually assumed. He befriended an acting troupe that held itself aloof from the cafeteria's erotic commerce at a perpetual gin-rummy game on a fast food patio around the corner where orange plastic tables were set up under the stars. It's now a swankier joint with an inside dining room and swishy waiters, a striving, hopelessly inferior Havana restaurant that makes you feel sorry for it. The actors quickly exploited Bird's guilty responsibility for the world's inequalities. Sighing tragically over existential problems they attributed to excessive integrity and thwarted artistic genius, they required groveling persuasion before allowing Ferd to pick up the check for the entire table every night. He welcomed that. He had an innate need to feel responsible for everything. There were pricklish, un-Cubanly snobbish groups, 6 bland, despendent white males and 1 Trotsky-bearded mulatto, dominated by 2 lipstick lesbians avant la lettre, who were not a couple and infused their theaterless theater company with an air of what I can only describe as chaste, imperious self-pity. I now have to wonder if my discomfort around them was justified, or simply a contrary attitude I struck in the face of Ferd's overdone camaraderie. The rummy table stood flush with the lobby of the Riviera Cinema. We soon knew the people working at the Riviera, their friends' friends. That's how things roll in Havana. The woman who managed the Riviera had a Gintero son who attached himself to Ferd like a limpet. Ferd was love-struck in a matter of minutes. The boy didn't have a pinguero face or build, only the same hollow look of corruption and a doggish persistence that screamed stupidity. He was furtive and scrawny, his teeth were bad, his feet stank. He scraped a livelihood from just anywhere. I couldn't stand him. Ferd towed him all over the island with us in a rented Lexus. In Santiago, their love story became unbearable. I couldn't look at that boy without hatred. Santiago featured an epidemic of conjunctivitis. Yellow snot seemed to drool from every eyeball. As soon as we arrived, I rented a separate habitation. It was the screened-off parlor of a ground-floor apartment in the center of town. The owner was a drowsy old Buddhist who said it didn't matter at all who I brought to the room as long as they weren't police officers. I pursued my own idea of fun for a week, escorted all over the province by a gang of punk rock gincheros in a 1950 Dodge convertible. We went to beaches and forts and ate a lot of seafood and fried bananas. One morning, the Lexus pulled up to the curb with Ferd's paramour behind the wheel. "Are you insane?" I screamed at Ferd, who looked crumpled and scared in the passenger seat. "We rented this on my credit card." "I have to let him drive," he said plaintively. "I can't see." I'm embarrassed by the tangled feelings, most of them childish, exposed during that brilliant, hideous holiday. I believe, for example, that Ferd took up with this charmless barnacle to reproach my beauty-free whorishness, to show how much more mature and meaningful his relationships were in contrast to my slutty one-offs. There were other tensions at work, unresolved issues between us. I think I'm working too hard to feel penitent about all this. I'm in danger of losing the thread. Santiago, the rental car, that finished it. Ferd wanted to borrow money. We were leaving the Lexus with the Rex car rental branch in Santiago. He'd spent himself broke during the trip and couldn't afford his plane ticket back to Havana. He said he needed to buy one for the Gimpera as well. He confessed that he'd already called Ricardo and Barbara, who owned my apartment, and asked them to wire $200 to cover that. He had more money in Havana, he'd simply miscalculated. He said the Yintero could catch a ride. I said the Yintero could catch a ride on a potato truck for all I cared. He should feel right at home, I said. He has the brain of a potato. It was infuriatingly cavalier, I told him, to ask Ricardo and Barbara for money. They were my friends, not his. They didn't have any money to lend anybody. He at least could have shown some trust and told them where he'd hidden his own money in the apartment and had them wire that. Furthermore, wiring money in the island, even within the country, was a complicated, ridiculously time-consuming process. It would ruin their weekend. To be bald about it, I thought it appalling for Ferd to presume upon people I'd known for years in a way I would never have myself, behind my back. I knew they would send him the cash because they felt they had to, since he'd come to Havana with me. I didn't think he deserved their help, or mine at that point. I flew back to Havana alone and left him to figure out how to get the potato across the island. My lack of empathy scandalized me at times. I couldn't control it. Ferd and I had stored up too much mutual resentment over 30 years to ever feel completely safe with each other. Now that it's too late, I realize I should have swallowed my loathing of that boy if he made Ferd happy, because he was abject and out of his depth. The boy tried to be invisible around me. He deferred to me like a servant, lit my cigarettes, pulled the chair out for me to get seated at dinner. At a certain moment, my hostility felt forced and tiresome, but I refused to show him any kindness. Even when he held my head while I puked in a sink one night when we dosed down in Trinidad, Cuba, I still couldn't look at him. He never asked for anything. He may even have loved Ferd, whatever that means. Abdul remembers the boy telling him that he crashed the rental car into a telephone kiosk in Santiago after I left. Ferd never mentioned it. The insurance must have covered it. A few weeks later, we left the island. We had stanched the wound as we habitually did, imagining that it would never bleed again. Ferd flew to Mexico ahead of me. We met up at the airport in Cancun and continued together to LA. I slept at his place at Mount Washington for a few days, then moved into Highland Gardens on Franklin Avenue, where I had been living a few months out of the year. Ferd returned to Cuba later in 2001, further proof that 9/11 didn't stop anybody coming here. He had the Yintero pick up where they left off, or it went bad. He never told me anything about it. The boy's mother no longer manages the Riviera Cinema, Abdul says. The family moved back to Holguin years ago. All right, I was jealous. I had to know I was more important to Ferd than the Yintero. It came down to that pathetic insecurity, something from prehistoric traumas that wreak more havoc in the present than they did when they were fresh. Ferd knew his time would run out a lot earlier than the national mortality rate. I know he counted on more than what he finished up with. Who doesn't? He carried the terrible weight of approaching death for so long, though, that a dark outline displaced the air around him. He wanted to have one last love affair, and I made him feel like a fool about it. This memoir does have a serious aspect. Shall we read a little more?
Yes.
Yes. North La Jolla Avenue, winter. Rain falls every day. The ground floor apartment resembles a monastery cell, and rain turns it dank and bleary as a police holding tank. Los Angeles needs water, but the winds blow it south and it misses the reservoir. The steady drought warning seems over-iterated and heavy-handed. You're not supposed to run the tap while you wash dishes. The toilet rule is, if it's brown, flush it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow. I scissor human heads and limbs from magazine ads and paste them into pages with a drunken boat in biologically impossible configurations. I'm making a collage book for a boy I met who was eating a burrito in the parking lot at Tommy's. He kissed me the way people kiss when they're in love. That was a week ago. He may not remember me now. His number is scribbled on a napkin stuffed in my wallet. Does he know who Rimbaud is? Does it matter? I can't tell what men I sleep with have in their heads. I meet them late at night and see the last of them before the sun comes up. I've sliced up the Thomas Brothers map I used to navigate the city and arranged the pieces in a maze no traveler could follow. A bookshop in the beveled corner of my building sells fetish gear and porn magazines, stroke novels, poppers, dildos King Kong would feel threatened by. If I look out the window, day or night, I see somebody in a parked car jerking off with a centerfold spread against his steering wheel. Once a week, I carry pillowcases stuffed with socks, underpants, jeans, and t-shirts to a coin-op laundromat beside a Winchell's Donut in a strip mall. I skim the Hollywood Reporter and try to finish reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich as my clothes wash and dry. I smoke weed in my rotary engine Mazda as it's towed through the car wash at Sunset in La Cienega. Afterwards, my brain feels as scrubbed and clean as the windshield. I buy pre-ripped t-shirts at Tokyo Rose to wear to clubs. I drive to Watts, drive home, refresh my skin with an Aztec Secret healing clay facial mask. I reread The Day of the Locust in 2 hours, primp a little, then drive to the Detour in East Hollywood or walk to the Rusty Nail at Santa Monica Boulevard. I get drunk 3 or 4 nights a week. I pick up a new person every night. This procedure is fraught with insecurity about my attractiveness. My willowy fey look passed out of fashion a while ago, when the androgynous template slowly butched up during the disco era, becoming the present macho clone craze. I'm put off by the Leatherman thing, handkerchief signals, big hairy chests, and mustaches. If the Tom of Finland types aren't as stupid as boiled okra, they give that impression in conversation. But there are usually some available persons in my acceptable range of maleness. That is down to whether or not they see me in a similar light. When I can't think of anything else, I drive up Malibu Canyon to a spot where the wind disappears and the Pacific Ocean fills the entire view. The way sunlight shatters across the limitless water calms me with a sensation of infinite possibilities. This epiphany curdles into dread as I drive back down to Pacific Coast Highway. At the moment, I am 25 and waiting for my life to start. The will to make this happen feels beyond me. I'm told I think too much and have too many emotions. For some reason, this terrifies people. In my own estimation, I'm emotionally blocked, stupid in practical matters, and cursed with an isolating intelligence that's worthless. Emotional only insofar as I'm prone to panic attacks when my coping skills fail. I've gone into hospital twice for depression, which taught me where the safe line of sanity is. There's a threshold of self-neglect I can't cross without getting locked up. I have to carefully gauge how much unhappiness I can manage, as I seem to be a glutton for it and still function. I've been on various psychiatric drugs for years. Lately, I've dispensed with them in favor of self-medication. I have no reliable idea who I am. I can be whatever somebody wants temporarily if I glean a clear intuition of what it might be. I'm so solitary that roles I try playing for other people seem contrived and arbitrary. I'm uncertain enough of my existence to absorb nearby tastes and opinions as if claiming them as my own will bring me into clearer focus. I have a pinching wish for attachment. I don't know if it's real. It might be the product of movies and songs on the top 40. Love is all you need. If loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. Can't live if living is without you. This is dedicated to the one I love. In the bar ghetto, I'm defensively cynical or pretend to be. I don't fit with anyone I meet except in the lubricious, sweaty, transient junction of organs and holes, a fusion of raw desires that discharge themselves with 2 spurts of jism. The guys I pick up are impervious to emotional complications, intent on probing a fresh body, pushing beyond conventional sex, lab animals staging their own experiments. I do anything I'm asked that won't kill me. I'm averse to grunting leather ladies, but I'll go to a lot of the same places they do, taking the same risks. I prefer a Ray Davies or Bowie-looking type to fist me, whip me, whatever, over getting mauled by a human tank. It's not my usual thing. What I look for is an abridged version of what I want, a no-fault fuck in the parking lot of time between last call and the morning reality principle, and a modicum of cordiality. I live in a goulash of stalled creative yearning, surges of paranoia, fits of depression, frequent spells of drugged euphoria. I is a blur, something like a photo paper in developing tray. I swallow speed each morning in place of a vitamin pill. I hear voices. I talk into a tape recorder driving to work, preserving logarithmic routines in my head. I'm inhabited by a cast of characters sucked from outer space by amphetamines. A morbidly obese cab driver fond of guava jelly donuts who gets his own talk show after running over Al Pacino. Gary X, a gay liberation terrorist recruiting for a Bider-Meinhof branch in California. A jilted studio hairdresser, May Fade, improvises verbal suicide notes, digressing often to recall her work on tragically hirsute or alopecia-stricken movie stars. These cassettes circulate among some friends who send mail art to Ray Johnson. This group calls itself Science Holiday. Its members build exploding sculptures from old chemistry sets. They occupy hard-to-locate pockets of the city and depend on public transportation, the alternative universe of the non-wheeled. Their main activity is cult worship of Darby, Crass, and Devo. They have private understandings that excludes me. I'm over-talkative and uncool. They tolerate my company because I own a car. It's depressing to be tolerated, but in this city, even bad friends are hard to come by. When the baby June impulse strikes, I hit the piano bar circuit. Frequently, I experience a compulsion to be seen and heard by total strangers. I would be in the right town for this actorish craving if I weren't such an obvious fag. LA hosts numerous smoky lounges where anyone can grab the microphone and request a tune from a Vladek Shabal-looking lookalike parked to the keyboard. In years to come, this safety valve for wage slaves degenerates into karaoke. After many drinks, I have a pretty decent singing voice. In all black bars in Crenshaw, the piano players know Edith Wilson's Mistreated Blues and I'd Rather Go Born by Etta James. At the other side, a wrinkle room in Silver Lake where the decor evokes a perpetually hangover geriatric white Christmas. It's Lerner and Lowe, the night they invented champagne. Or Cole Potter, or Cole Porter, you're the top. A niffy choice given the clientele. You're the purple heat of a bridal suite and use. You're Demilo's Venus, your King Kong's penis, your self-abuse. I need a few drinks to actually do that. My finale is an Ethel Merman-esque, there's no business like show business, belted out with demonic abandon. Is this anything I want to remember better? Yes, no, you tell me and we'll both know. Like everything else irreversible and embarrassing, I'd like to remember it differently. So that's... I'm not going to embarrass it by telling you who's here, but it's somebody really special. What do we do now?
We can ask you questions.
Oh, okay, but can I get like a coffee or Coca-Cola?
Sure,
or something?
sure.
A
Some
Coca-Cola.
caffeine?
Yeah, something with caffeine. I didn't
Okay.
really sleep.
Do you want to
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but like a couple of times this week, I've been awakened by my stupid iPhone ringing, but it's always somewhere far away, and because I can never get the the ring thing right, it's like they have all these menus of this crap, and I can't. I'm just looking for the one that everybody has, and I think I have it on there now, but like it's really hard to find them, and so a couple of times this week, I found myself looking for the phone, but still being asleep, and moving around the apartment in search of the phone, and then it stops ringing, but I find the phone, and I'm thinking, oh, well, all I need to do really is look at the telephone log and, call back whoever just called. But then, because I'm still asleep, I keep going like this, right? And it's not doing anything. It just has the numbers in front. And I keep doing that. I think, okay, something's wrong. The phone and I are in an alternative universe. Somehow it's just not happening with this phone. And then kind of wake up. But I'm still glazed over. So I end up calling the person back, and I think I'm talking to somebody else. And that happens to me twice. Today it was like the guy that helps me with stuff in the apartment sometimes. And yeah, it was very unusual sort of, like this space between being awake and being asleep is kind of beautiful in some ways and kind of terrifying in other ways, because you don't really know what you're doing and you don't really know where you are. Sometimes it's kind of better than where you thought you were, but sometimes it's worse, because you might be going crazy. Yeah. Twice, I have insomnia all the time. I've had insomnia my whole life, but I thought it went away, but then I realized I was taking drugs. Then when I didn't take them, I couldn't sleep. So I would often, in recent times,
It's coming.
okay, I would end up watching 4,000 episodes of Law and Order SVU because it runs all night. Just one after the other. And if that stupid bitch one more time says, "I'm really sorry this happened to you." Oh, great, thank you. Or the brutal one, the guy that used to be great in Oz, but he's an absolute jerk in Law and Order. And she always saying to somebody who's had consensual relations with somebody 1 year older than them, like the girl's 16 and the guy's 17. She tells the girl, "I'm sorry, you were raped." And tries to get the guy sent away for life, it's like that. It's totally stupid, but sometimes they would have, they have people that later went on to, what's his name, Adam, from Girls, Adam, what's his name, Adam, yeah, he was on an episode recently. He plays a suspicious computer nerd. Who is spying on a woman who's not really his girlfriend, but he wants to protect her from somebody who is after her or something. I mean, he had this little role, but he really milked it. And then, the blonde one, who has this really problematical sister, who every time the sister comes up from Georgia, she kills somebody. have to cover it up, or like it was self-defense. Or she gets married to somebody who's a convict that's escaped from, the sister's always fucking up. And the mother favors that sister. She just like completely demonizes the detective one because the sister can do no wrong. And all the sister does is get in trouble. I mean, but I like the blonde. She overacts at times, but not as bad as like, what's her name? Jane Mansfield's daughter.
Mariska Hargitay.
Mariska Hargitay? Well, whoever she is. I don't like her. I like when she's under investigation. Because she's so self-righteous. They tried after, like, when Black Lives Matter really, got big, they tried to show the New York Police Department mending their ways, right? And, they want to bring in some relevance, which of course everything in it is a total fantasy. These are not like police officers at all that we know. I mean, and I remember she's telling like some superior person, I know I'm not a racist. And of course she is. She patronizes every person who's not a white, gingerbread, whatever. I'm sorry, what were we going to do? What?
Do you want to do a couple of questions?
Yeah, well, I could take questions from the audience. I mean, it's kind of unusual, really. Isn't it? I don't know. But anything you'd like to know, as long as it's not personal. Any questions from the audience? Nothing? Okay.
I really enjoyed your book Resentment, and I'd love to hear more about just like what inspired you to write that and that full.
Could you speak up so everybody can hear you?
Yeah, sorry. I just was saying I really enjoyed your book Resentment, and I would love to hear more about what inspired you to write that, and not just that book, but that whole trilogy.
I can tell you about the origin of that book very easily. I was sitting in a wine bar in Paris, waiting for Jean-Jacques Schul to show up because he was supposed to meet me. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And he has a bad hip to this day because he never got the operation, which slows him down a bit. But also, he's somebody that will, how some people pull you like taffy, like to see how far they can go. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And I happened to have just bought some yellow legal pads. And so I started writing everything I resented about Jean-Jacques Schul. And that segued into everything I resented about my brother. And that turned into the Menendez brothers. Somehow, I really got on a roll. And I was thinking of Thomas Bernhard in the beginning of the book. The Lime Works, where there's all this palaver about did he shoot his wife with 4 bullets or 3 bullets? Did he use them, from behind? And so I mean, it just goes on and on and on because the story being told by this insurance salesman that's going from tavern to tavern, and they're all arguing about how the guy killed his wife. But not like how they know. I mean, but like, how many bullets, how many times he shoot her, from where, in front or back. So I just started recounting what I knew of what had happened at the Menendez home on that fateful evening. And it just kind of started rolling out of me naturally that these brothers, how they'd done it and what they'd done, like, they gone out to the Trans Am to get they loaded with birdshot and then with buckshot. So they had to figure out like how many rounds of birdshot, how many did Lyle, did one or the other go in first, and which one shot the mother to put her out of her misery. And it just seemed like so natural to me that people would kill their parents. It really did. And you know what? I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but only in very recent days has it come out, and I said it at the time, that Jose Menendez molested Menudo. He discovered Menudo and he molested every fucking one of them. Of course, back then you couldn't even introduce that in court because you couldn't prove it. But they do have proof now because Menudo spoke up. I knew it. Because nobody kills their parents for money if they can get money out of them without killing them, which they could. So I just figured they had a good reason to do this, and I'm kind of glad they did because I got a book out of it.
We have this a Coke
I would actually prefer this at this point.
Fantastic.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
I can do one more question.
This slob is going to go through every
Okay, we'll see if it explodes.
I got it.
All right.
What?
I'm just here's backup in case it explodes.
Oh, no, I can open a bottle.
Sounds like a poem.
I can open a bottle. It sounds like a Frank O'Hara poem.
I know.
I can open a bottle of Coke and think of you. And Greta Garbo. That's up.
Thank you.
Now, resentment sort of just sprang itself into my head. And then I had the good luck that other people murdered other people. So after I finished that book, I went on to another murder, which was like Andrew Cunanan, a fun character from San Diego. My book about him was completely counter to all the other narratives, right? Because I thought, why are you calling his killing Versace an assassination? You're not a potentate from the 19th century. Fucking fashion designer. Any other questions?
You've got time for one more.
In the sections that you've read, you talk about your attraction to attraction, your ungenerosity, your cruelty that is more habit than cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
And you say you were 25 around that time, and it's been
Yeah.
a couple decades since then, obviously. And
Been more than a
time
couple.
passes. But do you feel like those things have changed? Do you feel like they are still in you? Do you feel like you have figured out how to live with them if they're still there?
No, I'm a different person than I was when I was 25. I mean, I'm just a different person. With Fred Hagen, I had a very, very complicated relationship, most of which is like sort of explicated in this book. I mean, it was a decades-long relationship that was very intermittent, sometimes we weren't living in the same city or we just stopped communicating. But it was a very important relationship, but I didn't realize how important it was while I was writing the memoir. It kind of stole into the narrative as a kind of connecting thread between a lot of various episodes. I mean, he was a very important person in my life, and I loved him a lot, and he loved me a lot, but we didn't trust each other at all. It had something to do with a kind of, I would say, mutual envy. I envied him, he envied me, I thought I should do what he was doing. He was a political activist, and he thought he should do what I was doing, which was being a writer. And that created a certain free zone of a negative kind. But also, I mean, when I first met Ferd, I was exploited by him and his paramour. Was seriously exploited. I was young and pretty, if anybody here can believe that. And they pimped me out to pay the rent. You know, I mean, stuff happened that I certainly find it easy to forgive in retrospect, but at the time, it was emotionally very complicated. I'm not gonna say traumatic, I hate that word. And then like there was also this thing like, and this was odd, there was a period when I had a lot of money and he didn't have any. And then there was a period when he had a lot of money and I didn't have any. And because I was such a bad person, when I was getting money from him, I never paid it back. When I gave money to him, he always paid it back. It was like that. I mean, there were little things like, I'm going to get back at you, you know? And so there was that. You know, it was sort of like a familial sort of relationship, actually. But I didn't think I was writing a book about that relationship at all. I just didn't. It came into it in a funny way. I wasn't even aware that it was that important in my life until I finished the book and I could see it. But I'm not the same person as I was at 25, I can assure you. I was more fucked up than you could possibly imagine. And it's not that I was a bad person, I just wasn't even a person. I didn't know what the fuck I was.
Oh, I had just one question. So I know that in a lot of your, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So I know that in a lot of your books, like Do Everything in the Dark, the characters are based on real people.
The what?
Based on real people.
What are you
people
talking about? Which one?
Do Everything in the Dark.
Oh, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. Like, what happened was this guy who had, I mean, all my books originate in these weird ways. I mean, they're just like something, like Rent Boy, I went to dinner one night and Patrick McGraw told me this story about a guy that woke up in Central Park without a kidney. And apparently, you know, some woman had picked him up in a bar and then, you know, rendered him unconscious and they took his kidney out. And I thought, that was a good story. So, you know, that was the origin of Rent Boy. And then Do Everything in the Dark, Billy Sullivan, who's a great friend of mine for many, many years, painter. This guy that was doing these deluxe editions of like art books things wanted to do a book with Billy, and Billy wanted me to write some stories that would go with the paintings. And the paintings were all of people that we knew. But I approached it as like, I'm writing this as though I was writing a play for these people to perform in. In other words, it's not directly about them. It's about a character that they could play, like in a movie or something. So that's how that originated. But then, much later, I realized it was much too close to the, you know, reality of those people. But I didn't realize it when I was going along because, I don't know, I just didn't think I was doing what I was doing. You know, because a lot of that really happened, even though the stuff that I think is really good in that book is stuff that really happened that I wasn't there, that people told me about. So I got it like second or third hand from people. So I could dream it up, like the intervention in the book where these people gang up on this guy for drinking too much, which is a really, really funny part of that book, you know, because they're all a bunch of shits. You know, and they really are humiliating this guy, you know. You know, like that. That was how that was engendered, actually.
Do you go back to some of those books and think you have a different opinion of some of the people the book was based on, or you go back and you think, how could I have thought that about her?
I think one becomes kinder with age. You know, I have a kinder opinion of many of those people than I did at the time. I mean, a lot of those people were people I loved a lot at the time, but some of them I really didn't. And I think as time went on, I thought, well, you know, they're not that bad. You know, they're really not that bad. You know, Hitler's bad. But they're not Hitler, you know. Anything else?
Okay.
I forgot to mention earlier, we're going to do a signing after. We're going to do a signing over there if you want to get your book signed. And then if anyone got a voucher, it's just good for tonight for anything in the store, $5 off. And I think that's all she wrote.
Great, okay. I have a bunch of I want to get the new Dennis Cooper.